just don't make sense to me, but I think that gives us enough to talk about. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them right now.
We had another slide up there that we just sort of briefly,
Yep.
I think it was, yeah.
This is, Enwin is saying that they're an incorporated company, so they deserve to make a profit. Just because they incorporated, they deserve to make a profit, which is, everybody knows, is just totally ridiculous. That means anybody who opens up a company and gets a charter from the Ontario government, becomes a limited company, is allowed to be profitable. Is guaranteed to make money. Well, we know that's not true. So just the fact that they're incorporated doesn't give them the right to make profit. So the concept doesn't apply to an organization that has a monopoly. It provides a service which is a necessity. The only way they can make what they call a profit is by charging more than it costs to run the business. If you like the city of Windsor, I don't know what their budget is, 400 million maybe, say, well, we're going to add 10% to that, and we're going to set the rates based on 400 million plus 10%. Then at the end of the year saying, guess what, taxpayers, we made a profit. We made a profit of 40 million. Aren't we doing a good job? And that's basically what the utility here is doing. And they're calling it a profit. It's not a profit. It's just charging more than it costs to run. You have to have electricity, and you can't get electricity from anybody else but Enwin. There's no, you can't say, well, I'm going to go down the street. Like you can go to Walmart, you can go to Target, you can go to Sears. You've got Enwin, and you have no other choice. Plus, you can't even say I'm going to do without it. I don't want electricity. I'm going to go back to nature. Because you know, on a practical point of view, you can't do it. So, it's a monopoly in the truest sense. The unionized employees are represented by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and the pension system is administered by the owners. So that's a public system. And they're claiming they're a private company. You know, either you're private or you're public. Well, there is a review of prices by Ontario Energy Board. The fact of the matter, prices are always going to go up, never not. So there is some oversight on prices. I don't know if there's mention that, but no real effective oversight. Prices have no relation to the real world or to competitive forces. Inflation, recession, deflation, depression. You'll never see a buy one get one free at your local electricity distributor. I mean, they don't care whether there's a recession on or depression. People are losing their jobs. They're setting their rates for that. They can add on X 3 years ago to current rates, and we saw that with the interest side. Is that the taxes and interest side goes back to 2002, and they're charging it to today. No other company can do that. So we lost money 10 years ago. We're going to figure out what that was. And we're going to add it to prices. And the competitive firms can't do it. The real world can't do it. And, of course, they had a capital supply of customers. There's no need to advertise. What company wouldn't love to be in the same position that Enwin is as far as a business model? Let's start at the back.
I'm just wondering, what exactly does North Bay Hydro do with any profit that they might make during the fiscal year? If they did make a profit, let's say, would they return that back into the infrastructure and wipe that profit away, or would they pay the dividend out to the city, or do they regulate the rates so that it's impossible for them to make that return on equity?
You're asking me what they do at North Bay Hydro?
Correct.
The profit.
If a profit is made.
Yeah. I don't like the word profit.
Return on equity, I believe, is the correct term.
They do basically the same thing that Enwin does. They give the city a dividend. Enwin has 83,000 customers. North Bay Hydro has 23,000. So the figures are different, but the game is the same. So they do give the give North Bay, City of North Bay a dividend, I believe it's around $1.5 million a year. And the rest of it, then they give a portion, of course, to the province by way of taxes. And the balance, Hydro just puts that in their pocket. What do they do with it? We don't know, and they are telling us.
After all these years of operating like this, is it doable to change it into a non-profit organization? Since all the ratepayers in Enwin uses are the owners of Enwin. Is it something legally the city can do to make it non-profit? Has it been done before?
Well, as Alan mentioned, Thunder Bay does it right now. They don't make profit.
They were non-profit right from day one.
Well, the problem really isn't the profit. If there were no taxes and anyone wanted to charge twice for the double paid cost to deliver electricity, there'd be no real problem. Because eventually, citizens are going to get the benefit of the money. It's coming out of the same pocket, and there would be no problem. The problem is, when they make a profit, they have to pay approximately 30% in taxes and HST. That's the problem. That's it.
I'm wondering, why don't we just sell it off to a private company? I remember when Ontario Hydro turned Enwin over to the city of Windsor. And basically they gave it to them, no debt, debt-free, and immediately they loaded debt onto it for some other projects or whatever they needed at the time. And I don't know what the debt is now, but you know, whether it's gone up or down or whatever. But you know, at that time they should have immediately sold it, got rid of it. They could have got a fortune for it, and not to have to worry about it anymore. Why can't we do that now?
Well, I'd just like to correct you on a couple of things. When the utilities were incorporated, they were already owned by the municipalities. Hydro One never owned Enwin. That was owned by the city of Windsor. It was always owned by the taxpayers. What they did was allow them to take those assets, transfer them to a limited company. The limited company gave them back a note for the value of those assets. So
And then they added debt onto it.
they sold it to themselves, basically.
But then they put debt on it.
Well, Enwin owes the city, still owes the city for what it costs to buy the assets from the city. And they're paying interest on that, I presume, on that note. So there's no problem there. As far as selling it to a private person, they could do it. But there's no way they're going to do it because of this is like a cash cow. Once they sell it, yes, they'll get the, I don't know, 200 million or whatever it's worth. They'll get that, but then they'll lose control over any of the income is going to go to the new owners. So that's a business decision. Yes, sir.
There's some people here, I think that you said, are from Enwin and from Pricewaterhouse. I wonder if they could comment and tell us whether they agree or disagree with what you say. Then the other question I have is, what is the actual rate of return that Enwin charges?
Sorry, I can't hear you, Tom.
Okay, what is the actual rate of return that Enwin charges? I saw a number of 12.8% in some Edfin material.
No, the actual rate of return from 2009, I was showing you. Here it is here, 8.01.
No, I know that, but could the Enwin people tell us if that's their actual rate? Because I've seen different numbers on Edfin materials.
These are the actual figures.
Well, no,
There's no dispute about these figures. Enwin won't argue with those figures.
Well, perhaps the Enwin people could tell us that, because I've seen numbers that go as high as 15% as a rate of return.
I don't, there's so much.
They're here, they can answer it.
There's so much.
I will say that I got notice from Andrew and Victoria that they were coming as observers tonight, so
Well, then perhaps the Price Waterhouse people could answer it.
There's a question over here. Yes, sir.
I was at a city council meeting, and at that city council meeting, the Price Waterhouse Cooper was there. A remark was made by Waterhouse Cooper that the idea, of running no profits, like brainless, that things wear out, things get broken. But would it not be reasonable if you tried, everybody knows you can't run to an exact zero. You're either going to make a little tiny bit of money, you're going to make more money, you're going to lose a little bit of money, or you're going to lose a lot of money. And that's about the 4 choices that you have. But things do depreciate. Whatever happened to sinking funds? If you have, a whole bunch of poles that you just put up, or you just got a whole bunch of lines that you just put up, or a whole bunch of transformers that you just installed, they're worth millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, some of them will last 50 years, some of them will last for 20 years. Can you not set up sinking funds and money, a small amount of money put away, and then when those things need to be replaced, they can be replaced? And you should be able to do it, aiming, if you have proper reserves for replacement, you should be able to run on like a 0.5% profit or something just a little over zero.
Absolutely. This amortization figure, 11.487, that's pure cash to the Enwin every year. So if they have projects that they have to replace, renovate, or wearing out, that's what they should be using, or that's what they are using to do those things. If they need more money, well, they're going to have to borrow it. At 5%, just like the city does. I mean, the city doesn't operate on, we're going to set a budget, then we're going to add 10% just in case, because otherwise we're going to be broke. I mean, it's the same principle.
They make this profit every year,
Yes.
on top of year, on top of year. Why can it not be said that money sits in a pot, not in their pockets, so that when something has to be replaced, it doesn't come as a new charge on our bills to us, because they had to fix it. Why can it not be, like, they be made to take their profits that they've had for many years on top of each other, take the money out of that?
Because once they make a profit, they send 30% to the government. So they can't be allowed to make a profit, because right away you have a penalty of 30%. You make $1, you only have 70 cents left.
Right, but
So-
there's still that money, where's that money going to?
Well, that's another question. The point is, they shouldn't have that $1. They shouldn't be given that $1. They should use that 11 million, or they go to the bondholders, get some more money. They just shouldn't have that profit. Now, when they do get the profit, they pay the 30%, what do they do with the balance? Well, like I say, nobody's ever sure, because nobody gets to look at the books. Media can't go to the board meetings. The meetings are not open to the public. You have to, they will supply the financial statements, but you have to request them. But you can't, you have no idea really what's going on there, like at, say, City Hall or provincial government or federal government. They're under scrutiny every day. Hydro, can't talk about hydro.
Yeah, in describing the business model, you use the term investors. Do I understand you to mean that because it's a public company, there are no investors per se?
You're the investors.
We're the investors.
Yes, you own Enwin.
Yeah, we don't get any dividends. We don't get any.
No.
Because it's a profitable company.
Yeah, and they give some dividends to the city, and that benefits you, because you get lower taxes. But in the meantime, they send 30%.
We have zero tax increase, we just pay it on the end.
You presented this quite well,
Thank you.
and I'm not an educated person by no means. By no means, I'm not an expert at this matter. But when I hear what's coming out of your mouth about what's going on here, I say there is something smelling here somewhere. And to me, if you are collecting money and you don't pay that money out for something, that is bloody theft. My question to you, sir, is how in the name of God can we force our government to have a forensic audit so we come up with the truth, whatever, because we're not very well getting it now.
Well,
Thank you.
I think the truth is no, and the problem is get the politicians to change their policies. It all starts with Ontario Energy Board, because the local distribution companies are saying, well, OEB allows us to do this, and we're going to do it. So if OEB wouldn't allow them to do it, or stop charging them income tax, then the whole business model would change completely in a day. Yes, sir.
My question is actually for Alan.
Okay.
Sorry, Alan, that's fine. But does Enwin pay property taxes and taxes to the government as well, out of my rates? Or are the rates actually forgiven, the property taxes of their properties?
No, Enwin, I just looked that up recently. Enwin does pay taxes on, property taxes on their buildings, like the one downtown, the one on Road.
Do you have a number for us tonight?
Not off the top of my head. I think the Road Drive one was was 300,000, and the other one was 100 and some thousand or less. But they do pay taxes, property taxes, yes.
Yes, sir.
I kind of wanted to go back to the question the gentleman over here had asked earlier. I'm trying, I have a cold. From this point forward, I attended the city council meeting last month, and the vice chairman, who's the mayor, said that because council passed a resolution or a bylaw or created this entity in 1999, there was no going back. My question is that accurate, or is there a way that we could go to the city council and say, pursuant to this, we can go back to a nonprofit model or whatever, zero return on equity model? Is there a way we can do that, or is the mayor accurate when he says we can't?
I was being a little facetious there. If they passed a resolution or a bylaw, which I'm not sure if they did, they can always rescind it or pass another one. There's no way, there's no big deal. They could do it tomorrow, and that would be the end of it. It's not a big deal. Yeah, so he might be right in saying that that's what they decided way back when, but that certainly can be changed in a minute.
I talked to a fellow from the OEB just a couple days ago, and he said there's nothing to prevent a application with a zero rate of return for any utility. So that was what the fellow told me. His name was Mr. Thiessen, Harold Thiessen, and I actually gave that information to Tony today when we met earlier today from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So according to this gentleman, who is a OEB official, he's a senior official, he's not running the place or anything, but you can apply for a zero rate of return if the municipality wants to. I just wanted the accurate figure on the taxes. These guys asked me about the taxes. 787 Olette pays $127,355.71 a year. 4545 Rhodes Drive pays $344,302.30 a year. So we do pay property taxes.
What about the subdivision? You're sitting there with no owner, are they owned by anyone?
Yeah, there's about 5 of those, and yeah, you're right. I think they should do something with them. There's one in my ward.
They're sitting there, they gotta maintain them, they're vacant, they have rats inside them, and they're, what are they, equity, like, what's the scoop? They'll never come back.
Well, they're supposedly try to sell them, but not too many people want to buy them. I know that in my ward on Marion Avenue, there's a decommissioned one, and it was right by the Science Center, and the Science Center wanted to put a community garden there, and we've been rebuffed by Enwin, where they've said, no, we've got to get a return on our investment. We've got to try to sell it. We can't sell it to the city for $1 or whatever, so it just sits there. I think Gail had a question.
Alan, for the property taxes, does that include parking lot spaces as well, or just the buildings?
The only information I got from the tax department was the addresses, so I'm
So
assuming
that
it
it does
includes
not
the
include
parking lot.
the outside parking lot
Yeah.
as well?
Just one other question, in your experience of reviewing other utilities, is it normal for a incorporated utility electricity, because you're touching on one aspect of the complaints here in Windsor, our water rates are under control here as well. Is it normal for a incorporated electricity utility to swallow up another utility and then, you know, fold it in under the corporate umbrella and basically charge management fees and keep everything secret as well? Is that
This is
normal?
the first time I've heard of it, whether it's common or not, I don't know, we certainly don't do that in North Bay.
It's illegal what they're doing, isn't it?
Well, I'm just, in your experience, is that,
Yeah.
have you seen that?
I don't suppose there's anything wrong with it, because I think back in the old days, the two utilities used to be combined, used to be electric and water, right? Yeah. So the reason they split it out was because the OEB took over responsibility for the rates and allowed,
Okay, thank you.
Just more information on what happened before the Electricity Act in 1999. Don was telling me something interesting today, that we kind of got a hybrid. Mike Harris' government actually wanted to totally privatize everything. So they went halfway, and now this is what we got. It's sort of like,
it's the worst of both worlds, basically, yeah. That's what it turned out to be.
Anyway, there's a fellow named Joe LaFontaine, if you follow this closely. He writes a number of letters to the editor. He used to be the head of the LaSalle Hydro. He was there when they took over, and it drove him crazy. He said they had no debt. I think 98% debt-free, and all of a sudden they had a huge debt because they were giving this money to the municipality. So now there's all kinds of debt. A lady called me today and said if they can give the city a dividend for $4 million, why don't they pay off their debt? And the debt apparently is 60 million, I think, and 60, 70 million. They just had a debt offering with WUC. WUC also took some debt, they took it together, and it's $103 million total. So, well, they've done it. Yes, apparently there's going to be a report to council. I've been anxiously awaiting it on what happened there. And they don't call it a merger between WUC and Enwin, they call it a single utility. So I don't know, that you might say that's a bit of a euphemism, but that is coming. And one of the things that has always bothered me is the Enwin managers also manage WUC, and there's a management agreement between it's called MSA between WUC and Enwin, and I think it's in the $11 million range, and basically an increase in that $11 million was imposed by Enwin a year or two ago, without even consulting with WUC, or certainly that's what Bill Mara said and other members of WUC. And it's bothersome that you have people serving two masters, but they do. And the reason too that they don't declare the salaries of these people. Everybody else is subject to the Sunshine Law to make over 100,000. Now, it's not just Windsor. Apparently, hydro companies, the provinces, hydro companies across the province, they don't have to abide by the Sunshine Law for whatever reason. Everybody else does. Every other arm of government, they have to declare it, but hydro no. So,
Would it be because they've incorporated it?
It's like a private.
well, they call it a private company.
Yeah.
That's the excuse they use, yes.
Yeah, that's it.
What's that?
Alan, when you're the council executive really meets, do you get any inside information as to what's going on in Enwin at any time?
No, not really. I was invited to a meeting, an information meeting back in October. And it was about this proposed single utility and the debt, the debt that they were going to take on, the debt offering. And so I attended that. I had to sign a confidentiality agreement under duress. Well, there was only 4 that were added who aren't on the Enwin or WUC boards. And so this was an information for us. And then I took some notes, and Mr. Sasso seems to have left. He said I couldn't take the notes with me, so.
Well, you had to surrender your notes?
Yes.
We did.
You've got to be.
We're in a dictatorship. This is the degree Alan, I hate to say it. Councilors are to blame for the mess.
Well, councilors can make the changes, I believe. Councilors can make the changes. I think councilors can say we're not going to give a dividend. But, politically, it's favorable to take the dividend and you've got a tax freeze, right? Or you can say I got a tax. Well, I know.
It's backdoor taxation.
Yes?
Alan, I got one last question for you. I'm concerned about a downloading of cities' natural responsibilities over to Enwin. What is to ensure us that Enwin Utilities isn't going down and fixing 5 feet of pipe and paving roads with our utility money? What's to ensure that, if that doesn't happen?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to ask me.
Board of directors.
Yeah, everything goes to the board of directors.
That's the only way they beat the law.
Now, Windsor is a little, I don't know if I should say this because the counselors on WUC and Enwin receive a stipend, and I get, it's pooled among all counselors, including me. And, but there's, I think, about half of the boards are counselors and half of them are citizens. Don just told me that there's the board members in North Bay don't receive any money.
No, they're not paid at all, it's all voluntary. And the mayor's on the board, he doesn't get paid for being on the board.
Because it's basically a nonprofit, right? Well, no, you know what, isn't that what you said?
Yeah, they can make a profit.
Right.
So they are reducing their expenses to that degree, yeah. But
The other, no.
How will they handle the
Well, no, there, I want to see this explanation when it becomes public. But no, WUC is going to have its own board. They're going to share managers. I think they're going to share, I think there's going to be a downsizing of the workers.
They don't have any workers.
Between WUC and Enwin. The debt is sort of they don't call it a shared debt, but they went out to offer, supposedly they got a better rate because they
4.1,
went out together, and I don't know if that's true, but that's what they're saying. I don't have any reason to doubt it.
$14 million in interest over 30 years.
Yeah. Now, I have heard a number of times people from the Enwin board and officials say debt is good.
It makes money.
Yeah.
Right there.
So they seem to think that debt is good, and I think it's based on 60-40. If they were a real private company, that's how they set it up.
60-40, that last slide showed that, 60-40.
Yeah, so much is debt and so much is equity. And again, I don't pretend to be an accountant. But I did want to read this from Joe LaFontaine to get back to him. And he said when they did the changeover with the Electricity Act, as I said, he said most hydro companies in Ontario, including LaSalle, I would assume Windsor too, had no debt. And the first thing they did was they gave the city, I know in Windsor, they gave the city a $46 million dividend. And the city turned around and put it on their debt, and all of a sudden we had a debt reduction program.
Yes.
But the debt was transferred over to Enwin. Another thing that he said, because some people are saying, well, what happens if you stop taking profit, and they need money to keep the system up, there's an emergency or whatever, the city's gonna have to bail them out. Now, I think we discussed this.
We did discuss it, that's red here, I mean, that's like saying, well, what happens if Windsor runs out of money and we can't plow the streets? What are we gonna do? Well, you're gonna do what you have to do. They set rates every year, so how can they run out of money that fast? They estimate for a year, the next year they estimate again. I mean, how could they possibly run out of money to that extent? It's just not gonna happen. And let's say the city did have to give them money. It's coming out of your pocket, either through the city or through the hydro. So you give them the money, they do what they have to do, and everything's kosher. I mean,
well, how do they have the money to do this extra expense that comes up if they give them this profit to the city in the form of a dividend? They don't have the money now anyhow.
yeah, they don't give it all. Because they make 15 million, they give 4 to the city and 4 to the province, they got 6 left.
Yeah.
The question is what they got plenty left.
Okay.
According to Mr. LaFontaine, the previous regime, before the Electricity Act, there was a rate of return of 6%. And it was used to, to maintain and repair and provide new infrastructure with 6%. And then when the new regime came into place, the new system, then they allowed for the profit, I guess, over and above the 6%. Which now goes up to, it almost went to 10% at one time, and now it's back to, I think, 8.75 is.
There's a 1% difference from 2009 to now. It was at 9.57, it's now 8.73 or something.
And the province sets it, right?
The OED sets it, that's where that 801 came from.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the maximum up to, it was up to 9.85% at one time.
Well, that's the rate they're talking about, the return on equity or return on rate base. Yeah. And back in the old days, when they did make 6%, by taking his figures,
Yeah.
they didn't pay taxes. They used the whole 6% to upgrade the utility, repair things, or build new installations. Now, if they make 6%, they give 30% of it to the province. And that's the whole crux of the issue right there.
That's the
all
main
you
problem.
Yeah, that's all you really have to know.
We're giving away money
For no reason.
for no reason. We're generating money.
Yeah, you get
And
money.
then 30% of it we give to the government, to the federal and provincial. So why make that money in the first place?
That's it in a nutshell. That's all
Why
you
make
have to
it?
know.
Why do they take more money out of my pocket than they need? When they don't need the money.
If we get an answer to that, we know.
This seems to be the black and white of the story here is that we are paying more money for our services than what is required.
Absolutely.
Jim?
That's how basis of what we're talking about.
This is a public company. Why is it possible to get recorded minutes, freedom of information? Why can't the public have access to the minutes of meetings?
Well, again, the argument is that because they're a private company, a private corporation. Now, apparently, Mayor Francis has said they're under this restructuring they're doing now, they're going to allow public meetings and minutes.
But he also said, if I remember correctly, that past
It won't be
minutes
past
are
minutes.
not.
I think he said that on face to face.
Why did four city councilors support it?
Have to ask them.
By the way, that everybody should understand that the mayor draws $54,000 a year from the Enwin company on top of his salary.
And what, yeah.
From Enwin, yes.
Does she have any other question?
Yes. Without making a profit, how are they going to be able to keep putting money into their system?
Well, if you notice on one of the slides I showed, they're taking 11 million in amortization. That is just a bookkeeping entry. They don't have to pay that out. That's just an entry they put on the books, which they collect from ratepayers every year, 11.4 million. That's cash that comes into their system. It's not allocated for wages or repairs or, gas and oil or whatever. It's just money sitting there. That's what they use to do.
In case of emergency or anything like that?
Well, yeah, they can use it for that, or they can use it to upgrade the system.
Yep.
So that's why they can operate no profit and still have money.
Alan, this week, the statement was made that, pardon me, if you take leftover from Enwin, put it back into Enwin, that doesn't necessarily mean there's no lower rate. Can somebody tell me why not?
Yeah, well, I think Ms. Zuber made that statement. I think Michael Dubin wrote a letter to the editor making that statement. So I don't know where the 4 million, well, it would be actually 6 million, the way I understand it, because there's 4 in dividend and up to 2 million in corporate taxes.
The statement that was made was if they didn't pay the dividend, they said tax rates wouldn't go down, which is absolutely true, because they just keep the 4 million in their bank account.
If it was entered into back into the Enwin, what cost, but I don't intend the rate should go.
No, because once they collect that money, you never get credit for it in your rates. So I go back to my original point. It isn't the dividend that's bad, it's the profit that's bad.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to split hairs here a little bit. You're talking about a set aside. You have some money set aside that is a bookkeeping entry that could very likely be used for repairs, expansion, or
Not
some
repairs,
purpose.
repairs
How do
already
we
come.
separate? How does that set aside get separated from the profit, or is that not also a profit?
It is a profit, and that's why the money's
So it's,
available.
that set aside is taxed as well, or has
No,
it-
it's not taxed.
Okay,
It's-
so the
it's
PIL goes, when you do the books at the end of the year, and the part that floats to the top, that is like a profit, they pay in lieu taxes on that, and the set aside avoids. So why would they not take all the money that's, all the cream on the top and shove that into the set aside?
Well, it's not really a set aside, it's an actual legitimate bookkeeping expense. If you buy a building, it right away starts to depreciate.
Oh, it's
So-
a sinking fund.
Well, it's not, it's just a bookkeeping entry. Half of it is expense and the other half reduces the value of the asset. So if the asset starts at 100,000, you take 10,000 depreciation, that lowers it to 90, and you've got a $10,000 expense. So if you collect that 10,000 rates, that's free money to be used to
Replace.
eventually rebuild that building
So-
when it's, comes necessary. But it's not segregated in any real way.
I got 3 things to say. Everybody's confusing profit with operational expense. You guys are, I would assume, I've never run a utility company, but I would assume that Enwin would understand that a certain percentage has to be for maintenance, upkeep, replacement. That wouldn't come out of profit. I don't think so. They would understand that figure.
Maybe the 6% that I was talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, they would understand how that runs. So all this profit that they're making, when a transformer blows up, they already know that they have to replace that, and there's already, I would assume there's money, right? Like, I'm coming from experience of running a multi-residential building, and if you have to fix an elevator, you've already factored that into your overhead expenses, right? That doesn't come out of your profit, so your cap rate doesn't get impacted. 2 other things. You talked about a fictitious expense. And you talked about a fictitious expense when it came to do with
Deemed interest?
Yeah.
Deemed interest, yeah.
Yeah, you talked about a fictitious expense, and I remember it being tied to taxes. Like they're charging, I don't know exactly how you worded it, I can't recall. But how can they do that? Because if I collect taxes from my business, If I keep that, I go to jail. That's not a good idea. How can they keep it?
Listen, if you're not an accountant, you can't really understand the whole big picture, but take my word for it. They're charging you one, they're charging you one amount for interest and they're paying out another. That's all you have to know. They're charging you more than it costs you for interest. So your question should be, well, how do they do that? Why would they do it?
What do they do with the difference?
Goes into the bank. It's an ATM machine.
Just one more, just one more thing.
You know, not to pull any punches, that's what it is. They've got more money than they.
And even though you own it, you don't get a card for the.
Oh, that's like being married, okay, yeah.
Just one more. When the city sold the electricity entity, in which became Enwin as we know it today, right? What was the actual note that they traded? Do we know? Can we know that number?
What, was that the 76
Was that the
million?
47 million you talked about?
I think I know there was a $46 million dividend given to the city.
Generally what
About 46 million.
they did was they.
But that's not the
valued
note. That's not the note the city's holding. That
I'm
is
not
still
sure
charging
on that
interest.
one.
Yeah,
I'd
it
have
is.
to double check on that one.
Yeah, that's it.
I'd be very
It's not
interested
paid
how
down either, it's interest only.
the city had
Beautiful.
the asset
That's great.
for $1 at the end of 1990, the end of the 1990s. City, mayor of the day, sold those assets to Enwin for $169 million. Enwin, I would like to have confirmation of the figure. It's been said that they went to the bank, borrowed $52 million on the assets,
Sounds right, yeah.
plus $10 million for seed money. They gave the $52 million to the city, and they agreed over the next year to pay the balance of almost $120 million. They paid it off in 2010, including interest. The interest
6%
must
interest.
have been a wad, at least equal to the $170 million of assets.
No, I mean, to me, it was a shell game, you know.
There's no question about it.
At any rate, we could
why
go on here all
don't the
night
politicians-
discussing this, so the idea is when you leave here, contact your ward counselors, contact, you don't have to contact him, he
The
knows.
only man that speaks up is Alan Halberstam.
Not enough guts to do so.
With your MPP, if you can find him, he's retired, I understand.
And he started.
Get in touch with, what's her face there, get her to change the
Can I ask one more question? This really is about the rates with the province. I read about 6-8 months ago that actually we're now generating more hydro than we can use.
Absolutely.
The province.
That's
And that
another issue.
all the hydro that's coming out of the windmills
Yeah.
is either being paid, they're paying the United States or subsidizing the United States to take it off our hands. Why can't the province just give us, let's say, a 1 month moratorium on our bills rather than paying the United States to take this power off our hands when we have one? It makes no sense.
They've got contracts with the windmill producers that they're gonna pay 20 cents per kilowatt hour for every hour they produce, whether the province can use it or not. And that's why your bills are all gonna go up by a factor of 3 in the next 5-6 years. Not because of Enwin, because of the global adjustment, but that's another issue.
Just one last question. Would having a nonprofit mean that the city will have to raise taxes?
If it was a nonprofit,
Yeah.
would
Would
that
that mean
mean?
that the city will have to raise taxes?
No.
Yes.
Yes, by the amount of the dividend.
Which is 1%.
Except the amount of.
4 million is about 1%.
So the dividend would disappear, they wouldn't get a dividend from the city. So they'd have to raise taxes by a little bit, but your hydro bills would go down by 150% as much. So the taxes would go up by 4 million, hydro rates would go down by 6, just on that one, 6 million.
Well, we never see any evidence of what kind of
It goes to the use rate, so I would say it goes to the use
Goes
rate.
into the general fund.
General fund.
There was a suggestion at council that something strange happened at the time that the utilities were from the city and so on, and formed, I can't remember. And there were only two people who were from the city that were around at that time. One of them was Eddie Francis, and the other person was Alan Helmut.
Actually, I was there, Bill Maher was there, and Francis was there, and Valentina. Now, the mayor says I voted for the regime, I may well have, and I was 99, but I guess we all made mistakes.
No, I don't think you made a mistake, Alan, because you sold the bill of goods. Profit would come from commercial accounts, not from hydro. You know, and what did they do with their commercial accounts? They lost money hand over fist. Even Windsor Utilities Commission wouldn't pay the rate that Enwin wanted to charge to test the water. They went outside.
By the way, as far as I can glean, Windsor's one of the few municipalities where water and hydro is together. And I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but generally water is run by the city public works. We're here, they're partnered with
We appreciate you all coming out and keep the pressure on city council and on the municipal government and on the provincial government, and hopefully we can get a few municipalities together and do something about this.
Thank you.